welcome to our English news edition broadcast to you by Canal Algérie. To the headlines. The President of the Republic puts forward the high values and qualities of Imam al-Maghili in a message addressed to the participants in the international forum devoted to this distinguished Algerian scholar. The 3 terrorists killed during the common operations carried out by the National People's Army in Gouraya Mount are identified. And massive protest movements keep going on in Morocco in another attempt to change the unbearable living conditions imposed by the Makhzen regime. Good evening, those were the headlines. First, and under the high patronage of the President of the Republic, the proceedings of the Algiers International Forum devoted to the Imam Mohammed bin Abdel Karim al-Maghili kicked off on Sunday under the motto Governance, Unity and Stability of African Societies. In a message to the participants, the President of the Republic highlighted the lofty values of this distinguished Algerian scholar. More details with Melissa Kabash.
The opening ceremony took place in the presence of the President of the National People's Assembly, advisors of the President of the Republic, members of the government, the General Caliph of Tariqa Tijaniyya, as well as Algerian and foreign sheikhs and scholars. In a message to the participants read out by the Minister of Religious Affairs and Endowment, the President of the Republic highlighted the qualities of Imam al-Maghili and his efforts to spread the principles of Islam in our continent, as well as his values. The head of state affirmed that the reform project of the Imam al-Maghili exceeded the educational dimension so as to reach the different aspects of good governance, to maintain stability and social security through referential writings inspired by precepts of Islam.
The reform project of Imam Mohammed bin Abdel Karim al-Maghili isn't limited by educational dimensions. It reached the field of good governance to preserve stability and social security in the society. His writings are inspired from noble principles of Islam, namely the rule of law, justice and the respect of liberties and rights, alongside the efficient participation in the different social activities. The contribution of the Imam had also an African dimension, which is how he managed to create a field of consultation and constructive cooperation. The new Algeria is aware that the African dimension remains a strategic choice that allows people to reach their aspirations throughout the reinforcement of the diplomatic action. The revitalization of religious tourism and the adoption of methods in the African continent will also allow the establishment of coherence between the political positions, activate the economic cooperation, and promote scientific and cultural exchange, and by this installing a climate of peace and stability. Algeria has always been at the service of the African continent and will continue in this path, taking into account the deeds of our ancestors.
ستواصل المسيرة في حاضرها ومستقبلها. ستواصل هذه المسيرة بإذن الله في حاضرها ومستقبلها، مستلهمة كل ذلك من مجد أسلافنا وأجدادنا رضي الله عنهم وأرضاهم جميعا.
كان من توجيه سيد رئيس الجمهورية.
This forum was organized under the high patronage of the President of the Republic to pay homage to Sheikh al-Maghili, a scholar that traveled across several African cities to share his knowledge and teach the values of Islam. He even settled several ethical conflicts in African countries. Therefore, this event was an opportunity to recall his career and deeds.
الذي فض النزاعات والخلافات الإثنية.
لقد كان الإمام المغيلي.
The Sheikh brought peace and prosperity to several African peoples, namely in North Africa. And thanks to his values, we are all gathered here today after more than 500 years since his death.
The participants specialized in Islamic traditions emphasized for their part as well the values of dialogue and tolerance that distinguished the religious speech of this Algerian scholar.
Let us now put the spotlight on this prominent scholar who played a key role in spreading the genuine values of Islam in Algeria and the African continent as well. Story by Najah Tayyar.
Born in Tlemcen in 1425, Sheikh Abdel Karim al-Maghili is one of the greatest scholars of his time in the field of religious science, of Quran exegesis and Sunnah knowledge. He was a great humanist. He called for peace and reconciliation between peoples. He was deeply attached to his Algerian identity through his teaching and his deeds. This great humanist was ahead of his century by addressing issues related in particular to good governance, respect for human rights and peace between peoples. He was at the forefront in the fight against hatred and racism. He was the disciple of Abdurrahman al-Tha'alibi, who taught him noble values and the enlightened foundations of Islam. Abdurrahman al-Tha'alibi advised him to never live in a land where he will be humiliated. Before his departure for the pilgrimage to Mecca, Al-Imam al-Maghili made a journey to several African countries where he taught and trained the teaching of Tariqa al-Qadiriyya or Brotherhood. These books and accessories, which belonged to the Imam Muhammad bin Abdel Karim al-Maghili, are aired for the first time on a television channel. What we have left of him is a cane and a prayer rug. This is the first time we show these objects. This sword has been carefully preserved since the 16th century. Al-Imam Muhammad bin Abdel Karim al-Maghili passed away at the beginning of the 16th century, buried in Zawiyat al-Kunta, that he bequeathed for prosperity, an intellectual and spiritual heritage that is inscribed for eternity.
In a new development and following the common operation carried out on Sunday at Gouraya Mount, Tipaza province, by detachments of the National People's Army, and which resulted in the death of 3 terrorists and the capturing of another, in addition to the seizure of different firearms and other objects, the deceased terrorists were identified as Sharif bin Yahya, known as Sheikh Amr Safwan, Hamidani Abd Sabir, known as Abdu, who joined the terrorist groups in 2018, Hamidani Ali, known as Ramzi, who joined the terrorist groups in 2018 also. As for the captured terrorist, he was identified as Bishtal Hamza, known as Abu Al-Auf Al-Barra, who joined the terrorist groups in 2019. In a related context, in the context of the fight against terrorism, and thanks to the relentless efforts of our armed forces, a terrorist turned himself in on Sunday in Adrar province in the 3rd military region, Mohammed Ledmi, who had been an active member in the terrorist groups of the Sahel. The terrorist had in his possession 1 Kalashnikov machine gun, 5 ammunition chargers, in addition to more than 100 bullets. This operation reaffirms the effectiveness of the approach adopted by the High Command of the National People's Army, the aim of which is to eradicate terrorism and establish security throughout the national territory. And the 24th anniversary of the World Human Rights Day was celebrated in the capital Algiers under the slogan Dignity, Freedom and Justice, an opportunity for Algeria to reiterate its commitments to the values of this declaration and its determination to strengthen human rights and freedoms within a democratic system. The meeting was chaired by the President of the National Council of Human Rights, Abdelmajid Zalani, and a number of representatives of organizations. In a different activity, the Energy Minister took part in the 109th ministerial meeting of the Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries Organization. Mohammed Arqab called for intensifying efforts to participate in the stability of the international oil markets. Arqab also affirmed that the changes in the energy markets in general resulted in great challenges for the petroleum producing and exporting countries. They also discussed during the meeting the preparations for the upcoming meeting scheduled in Qatar. In other news, the Commission for Economic Affairs, Industry and Trade listened on Monday to a presentation made by the Industry Minister Ahmed Zaghdar, a presentation on the sector's strategy in line with the President of the Republic's guidelines. The main axes are the reform of the public sector by revitalizing and improving the business climate, as well as the promotion of small and medium-sized enterprises. This session took place in the presence of the Minister in charge of relations with the Parliament, Basma Azwar. And the National Institute for Global Strategy is hosting the proceedings of an international conference on natural resources and sustainable development, organized in the presence of the Minister of Higher Education and the Minister of Environment and Renewable Energies. In a different story, the military operations continue along the Wall of Shame in Western Sahara. Units of the Sahrawi Liberation Army carried out new attacks against positions of the Moroccan occupation forces in the Mahbas sector, resulting in considerable human and material casualties. And another scandal is shaking the Makhzen regime following the Pegasus scandal evoked by the administration of the U.S. company Meta. A leaked official Moroccan document revealed the Makhzen's practices to sow discord between Arif and Sahrawi peoples via the creation of approximately 3,000 fake Facebook accounts by the Moroccan intelligence services. In Morocco, the demonstrations continue, and the difficult economic and social situation and the restriction on individual freedoms, the oppression and deterioration of living conditions are all indicators that threaten the existence of the regime, while Moroccans are determined to continue their struggle against the shameful acts of the Makhzen regime. Story by Ines Killo.
A country facing an unprecedented social crisis that has seen the streets taken over by demonstrators for a month. Moroccans, plunged into complete chaos and extreme poverty, are going through the worst crisis in their history. The rise of prices has affected all products without exception, starting with basic foodstuffs. Fuel has not escaped the surge in prices, which has driven most Moroccans into misery. An unbearable situation against which the population is protesting in several Moroccan cities, calling for the departure of the Makhzen regime, which is incapable of finding a solution to this situation. The Makhzen is facing the toughest economic crisis that can exist.
هذه الوقفة هي ماشي من فراغ، وقفة من المعاناة ديال الشعب ومن المعاناة ديال هاد يعني الفقير المسكين المعوز اللي عجز على.
We are trying to survive in a country that faces a huge rise in prices of all products, and we are demonstrating to demand our rights. Morocco is now going through a very miserable phase because of the Makhzen's government.
احنا هاد الشعب ما خرج للشارع وكيناضل وكيقاوم وكيغوت إلا كاين شي حاجة اللي دفعته لهاد الخروج هذا.
Social protests are increasingly present and dangerous in Morocco, a situation that has persisted for several years now, and the Makhzen regime continues to ignore the demands of its people. This social protest is becoming more present and invasive in Morocco, a situation which is lasting for more than a year now, but the Makhzen regime remains indifferent and opts for silence towards Moroccan people's claims, who won't give up on reclaiming their rights.
Moving on to sports, the African Champions League draw held on Monday in Egypt puts the RB Belouizdad in the Group D along with Espérance de Tunis, Zamalek of Egypt and the Sudanese side El Merreikh. That while Algeria's second representative JS Kabylie will face WAC Casablanca of Morocco, Atletico Petroleas of Angola and the Congolese team of Vita Club in Group A. As for the CAF Cup contest, Algeria's sole representative, USM Algiers, will take on ST Eloy Lupopo of Congo, Maruma Gallants of South Africa, and Al Akhdar of Libya in Group A. And we wrap up our news edition with this vibrant homage to a Belgian painter, namely Edward Wischafflet, who had a great deal of admiration to Algeria and Algerians. The remainder of this passionate story in this report compiled by Najah Tayyar.
He is one of the Orientalist painters who have displayed a deep attachment to Algeria. This is the Belgian painter Edward Versterveld, honored at the Palace of Culture Mufti Zakaria by bringing together 40 of his paintings that are still on display, inviting visitors to discover his masterpieces that express the unconditional love for Algeria and the city of Boussaada. My father quickly fell in love with my mother, despite all the obstacles of those times. And you know, he lived his whole life in Algeria until his death. He considered himself a full-fledged Algerian. He had a great deal of admiration for Boussaada city. Indeed, Edward Versterveld arrived to Algeria in 1919 and never left where he lived until he passed away in 1955. Edward painted Algeria in a style that stands out from the Orientalist exoticism of the time, depicting situations of peasant life, characters with innocent looks, spring natures, or even pastoral pictorial works. The exhibition presents paintings which express the ties of the artist's heart to the land of Algeria. Edward was really impressed by the colors and the lights of the city of Boussaada. Besides, we can see it through these paintings where the tangible and intangible heritage of our country are very present. Born in 1874, Edward Versterveld graduated from the Fine Arts School of Caen and Antwerp, where he became known for his talent as a portraitist affiliated with the Flemish painting tradition and the artistic movement of the Belgian Luminism and Post-Impressionism, and his influence can be found in all of his paintings.
And with that, we come to the end of our program. Thank you for tuning in and goodbye.